started Launch for one very simple reason. Professional services, when it comes to the provision of professional services, I find that the traditional model of clients waiting to tell you what they need and then us implementing what they want is broken. Businesses don't know what they don't know. And when they're scaling, they don't know the questions to ask. So we are a specialist firm that only assists businesses that are scaling and growing. Capital is the lifeblood of businesses, and there are many different ways that capital can be facilitated, whether it is by grants or the R&D tax incentive, which is just one of the elements that we're going to speak about today. It's also by the provision of equity or by the provision of debt. Now, when it comes to raising capital, it's a very complicated process. There's nuances attached to it, and every single time you raise capital, it's a different experience. Now, all of you in this room are trusted advisors for your clients, for your colleagues. The reason we're talking about the R&D tax incentive specifically today is I'm blown away by how many people don't know about it, and I guarantee once you learn about it today and Sophia explains how you can identify it in your colleagues and your peers, you'll be able to share the benefit that you'll be able to receive from R&D with someone in your network, and it's really such an invaluable program that is offered by the federal government. So thank you for having us, Campbell. We appreciate it. I'll hand over to
If you weren't nice people, I wouldn't have invited you. There you go.
Corporate box it is.
Is this on? Is this on? Yep.
Yeah, no, that's all.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Nice to see everybody. Thanks so much for coming out and being here today. I'm going to be talking about the R&D tax incentive today. Little disclaimer, it's not advice. Call me afterwards. I just wanted to know who knows what the R&D tax incentive is. Right, we've got about 5 people in the room, which is to be expected. So it's a government incentive. It's not actually a grant because it's based on money that you spend. It's a program that's run by AusIndustry, Department of Innovation and Science and Resources, and the ATO. So it works with your tax returns. So effectively, it's a program where if you're innovating new technologies, processes, systems, products, you can get money, you can get some of your money back from the government. So what's R&D? R&D stands for Research and Development Tax Incentive, but it's not all about, this is our other director here, which I dressed up. It's not all about being a scientist in a lab coat, which is what you would typically think of when you think of an R&D process. You think it's very clinical. It's not always about that. R&D it exists in every industry. It exists in manufacturing, agriculture, food technologies, software development. It's a lot more obvious in this scenario because you can all visualize it than in others. But you could be a food manufacturer who's increasing the output of your machinery to get, XYZ out faster, and you're innovating in that space, and that could be considered R&D. So we'll go through a little bit about what it is. R&D, when you're thinking about it for the purposes of getting the tax incentive, it's an umbrella. There's a project, and then you have core and supporting activities, which we won't so much go into today, but I'll touch on it lightly. So in simple terms, it's when you're working with the highest level of new knowledge. It's a program that is run all over the world. Every country has an R&D tax incentive program, and it's about helping to develop new knowledge in your particular space. So there's loads and loads of examples. This one is, pretty much a good one. It's when a company is innovating. It doesn't have to necessarily be starting from scratch and innovating new technology. You might be improving a process or a system, and you might go through a whole lot of iterative steps to do that. So when you do that, you go through something called a systematic progression of work, which is the technical term for, oh bugger, I've failed. How do we make this experiment work? Or how do I make this prototype do what it was meant to do? So when you have failure, it's actually a really good indicator that you are doing R&D because you're experimenting and it didn't work out the way that you expected, which means that you didn't know the outcome when you started the activities, which are all precursors and things that you need to know for the R&D tax incentive. So that systematic progression of work, because this comes from the government, is very legal speak. There's a lot of legislation about it, is pretty much this is what you have to follow. You have a technical problem that you are trying to solve. You do your background research, you do your investigations, You develop your overarching question, which is your hypothesis. It's your technical question. I'm trying to solve X by doing Y to get output of this. You set up a plan, you develop your experiment, you go through it, you test your experiment, you observe, evaluate, rinse and repeat, or go through to commercialisation. This is where it's really important because clients can claim the R&D tax incentive every single year, and you have to claim it before you lodge your company tax return. And what it what it actually gives companies is money back. So we haven't talked about the benefits, but we'll do that now. So what's the benefit of doing the R&D tax incentive? It's 43.5% back on what you spend. So let's say you spend $100,000 developing your new technology or improving your systems. As long as you're hitting the eligibility requirements, you are a PTY LTD. You've spent more than $20,000 on eligible activities in your activities for that year, and you are undertaking R&D for the purpose of generating new knowledge, which is just a fancy way of saying you've gone through that systematic progression of work, you've done your background research. If you spend $100,000 and you're in a loss position, the government, and you lodge an R&D claim before you lodge your company tax return, the government is giving you back $43,500 into your pocket. If you are in a profit position, that's a tax offset. So a lot of companies are using the R&D tax incentive as a tax reduction strategy. They use it really successfully to bring down tax liabilities, which is an awesome strategy to use, but it's there to actually encourage companies to innovate and to continue to innovate, which, you know, bolsters the Australian economy, and which is why it's tied to your tax returns. So you've got to lodge your R&D claim first, and then you get a little number at the end of it, and that goes into your company tax return. So as consultants, we work really closely with companies and their accountants, because their accountants are our friends. They work with us. They give us all the information we need to pull out the eligible expenditure, which for companies can be things like wages of the person who's doing the experiments. It can be the cost of the floor space. So if you have a workshop and you've been innovating a prototype in a manufacturing capacity, there's floor space that you've used. So you've got wages, you've got floor space, you've got the inputs, you've got materials that you've used to develop. So there's a whole host of expenses that can be picked up as the R&D tax incentive eligible expenses, and they all all go in to make a bigger picture that gets painted and shared with the government. It's all proprietary. It doesn't get shared anywhere else. There are transparency measures where they tell, the government does post and say, XYZ company claimed the R&D tax incentive to this amount, but that's all that they share. So nothing about what you've been doing or developing gets shared with the wider public. So spend more than $20,000 and up to $150,000 on eligible activities within a financial year. Undertake the R&D in Australia and in an Australian entity, and have conducted the R&D in Australia. So there's a couple of exceptions. If you were developing this amazing robotics robot or something and we didn't have the know-how in Australia or the technology to do it, you could go overseas and claim those expenses to do that. But generally, if you were developing a piece of software and it was 5 times cheaper to do it in the Philippines, you can't claim that because you've just gone there to get a price reduction. We want to keep the knowledge, the skills, the talent in Australia, and the government is giving us an incentive to support that work that we do. There's a lot of eligibility that goes with this program, which is things like you need to keep documentations and records of what you're doing. So that's your evidence. It can't be attached to the application, but like your tax return and your receipts, it's got to exist somewhere and somehow. So we claim the R&D tax incentive within 10 months of the end of the financial year, so that gives everybody enough time to lodge their income tax returns. And we have all of the supporting evidence to support a claim should we ever need to. So because this is probably new for a lot of you in your businesses, how do you identify R&D in people that you're engaging with in your everyday dealings? So pretty good indicators. Do they have a patent? If someone tells you, oh, I'm getting a patent on my thing, I think I'm onto something here, and they're spending money investing in that, it's a really good indicator that someone is doing something new and novel. Are they developing new knowledge? Do you sit down at the bar with your friend and they're like, I've done something here, it's going to be the next best thing, and I think we're going to, do X, Y, Z. Do they spend money innovating products, processes, or systems? You would be astounded by the things that are R&D. So software development, and it's software, it's manufacturing, it's food, it's agriculture. Every industry has R&D in it, and it's not just drug testing and development of clinical trials and things like that. Are they an industry disruptor? Is what you're doing going to, break open the industry and you guys are going to brain it to the finish line? Are they building prototypes? Excuse me, prototypes to test. I've worked with clients that are having to build propellers and impellers, and they've had to get it manufactured, then they've had to test it, and they've had to put it on things. It's really exciting. Manufacturing, brewing companies, beer brewers, I guarantee you most brewing companies, whether it's a distillery or a brew house, they're all doing R&D because they've all got to work out whether their formulations, and that's formulations in alcoholic beverages, are actually going to work. Being in the position that I've been in, I'm really fortunate to have worked with such a diverse group of clients, and from every industry. I've worked with mushroom farmers that that have figured out how to grow mushrooms, not those mushrooms, but mushrooms for restaurants. Yeah, they've figured out how to grow them way faster than it naturally occurs. Are they going to be able to white label or license their technology that they've developed? Let's say they can sell it on to someone else. That's a really good indicator that they've got something that nobody else does. And maybe they need to set up a separate IP entity to protect their new developments. So these are some of the things that you may hear about just in general conversation, or when you're engaging with your friends, family, clients, all kinds of people. So I haven't gone into too much detail because I wanted to give everyone time for questions, but please, any questions?
Yes, so
Yeah.
just say a company wants to introduce software to improve their productivity and things like that. Is that something that can be used for that sort of thing?
Probably if they're introducing software that is off the shelf that you can just go and buy to create better efficiencies in their company, it may not be. However, if they have to custom develop that software, which means they have to hire developers and coders to write that software, and they have to do various integrations because nothing was available on the shelf that could help them make that solution, in that instance you would likely find elements of R&D. Yeah. Yes.
Does it always, I guess I've got a multi-pronged question.
Yeah.
Does it have to be something that produces a product that people can purchase, or like if you were developing software that other people can purchase?
Yeah, so it has to be commercial in nature. So a good example is that banks always develop new technology to make their systems improve. So if Commonwealth Bank was developing a awesome HR system because they didn't want to use what was on the market, they wanted to have their own in-house system, and they developed this, it cost them XYZ amount to do it, that wouldn't be considered R&D even though they've developed it from the ground up because it's for internal purposes. However, if Commonwealth Bank said, we've just developed the best piece of tech for bank staff and we're going to white label it and we're going to sell it to ANZ, Westpac, NAB, that becomes R&D because it's commercial. So anything that you're doing that has the commercial nature, that will be considered R&D. Yes?
Okay, I've got a friend who's been approaching me with new technology that's
Yeah.
it's an engine that actually self-propels.
Yep.
Stuff. It's actually self for other people. Now he's trying to bring it to, he brought it to Tesla as well.
Mhm.
Tesla was kind of ahhing about it.
Mhm.
So, but it's in Australia. How would you help this guy to launch? Or he's getting the funding.
Yeah.
Is quite a bit of tricky challenge for him.
It probably is, because it is very hard to get a product to fruition and commercialised and out there, and especially if you're going to companies like Tesla. So it sounds like if he's already approaching companies, his technology might be fairly developed and along that pathway.
Yeah.
Has it been developed?
Yeah, well, he's in the process of his patent.
Okay. So he's dead in this R&D zone. So he's probably either close to finalising his R&D. If he's going for a patent, he's already well and truly in the process of being able to claim this. So if he doesn't know about this, he should.
Free money.
It's essentially he's spending money and he can get it back. There are lots of steps to commercialisation and to getting the right contracts and things in place to deal with awesome companies like Tesla and doing that. And there are lots of government grants that can help companies do that, and lots of contacts. That's pretty specific, so I could definitely help give you some names of different funds that are available and open to people like your friend, and also assist them if they're still in that R&D phase. But there's a lot there that we could potentially help or guide your friend on.
Yeah, because he doesn't have much funds. He's trying to kind of
Yeah,
funds,
bootstrap
so
it.
it's like,
Yeah.
So, but he's got it's working. It works.
So there's a series of grants like the R&D tax incentive. This is the only one that's a tax incentive, but there's a series of grants that Australia offers, and Queensland is really pushing forging ahead with government grants at the moment, and we've got a lot of money because of the Olympics, and we've got the quantum computing happening up in Brisbane. So Queensland's quite a good space for businesses to be innovating right now, because there is a lot of incentives. But there's programs that follow on after the R&D, because R&D is at that innovation, getting ready to commercialise. You can be in an R&D phase for 7, 10 years, or you could be in an R&D phase for 2 years. So it really, and you can claim it year on year. The only prerequisite is that you have eligible activities, eligible expenditure, and that you've spent over the threshold of $20,000 each financial year, and that you're lodging a company tax return each year. So that's R&D, but then after that there's government grants like Ignite Ideas, there's accelerating commercialisation, there's a whole host of other programs that exist out there to help companies take products to the market and help them expand, and industry connections. So we're really fortunate here on the Gold Coast. We've got great facilities like Cohort and the Health and Knowledge Precinct that really incubate sort of health technologies and things that are evolving, and we've got great people up in Brisbane as well that can assist. So yeah, there's probably a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, it would be like, I'm just trying to get the Ignite Ideas. Is that right?
Ignite Ideas, yeah.
But so you're saying, just to clarify, you need to put a tax return as well.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
LTD has to be set
Yeah,
up.
proprietary limited. Yeah,
That's right.
no problems. Any other questions?
Any other questions here?
Does anybody think that they know people that might possibly be doing R&D without knowing that they're doing it?
Well, I was thinking of Harcourt's Coastal, etc.
Yep.
Maybe, but I'll have a chat to you about that later.
Yep.
In regard to that.
Yeah, but to mention it, it's got to be for commercialisation. So you
Yeah.
can't do anything to improve the internal
Processes, yes.
There's no way, there's no exceptions on that.
No, it's got to be commercial. So otherwise,
Yeah.
it doesn't benefit the ATO. At the end, they want to hang their hat on a good story. So
Yeah.
yes,
What about working with international like companies overseas?
Yep.
There's a thing that's been initially developed, or an idea has been developed, conceptualised overseas. They've got it to a sort of working
Prototype?
prototype-ish,
Yep.
but we're looking at scaling it and bringing it out and building on that capability to
Yep.
make it more commercially viable.
So R&D can happen at lots of points in the journey. If an initial concept is developed overseas, if you're going to bring it to Australia to further that development, you'd have to look at things like who owns the intellectual property. So who owns that? If it's an Australian company who owns that, they buy that IP, they bring it to Australia, and then they do the next set of development on it. Bearing in mind all of the eligibility things, then that would be likely be in an eligible space, yes. New knowledge is worldwide, so when you think about Dyson is developing the next best vacuum cleaner thing. It's got amazing battery power, et cetera, et cetera. They have to preface that with their knowledge is worldwide. So they have to check all around the world. And if something is existing, like let's say there's a competitor in the market, but you can't find out how they've developed their solution and it's not available anywhere, open source, it's proprietary, it's locked down, you can't get to it, and you almost go through a process of reverse engineering to develop your technology to try and better than what the competitor has, that is also R&D. Yeah.
Dennis, do you have a question?
Yeah, look, there'd be a lot of businesses that are doing R&D that don't know they're doing R&D.
Yeah.
Do you guys, or are you aware of anybody that would consult on an initial interview basis to identify R&D opportunities that the business doesn't recognise it's doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do that. We do a free initial consult of half an hour with a client. R&D is very much the bread and butter of what I do in the grants team. It's one of the best programs that Australia offers, and we globally Australia offers the highest percentage. So I make it my business to go out and try and get to the root of, are you doing R&D, by asking certain questions and getting to the root of that pretty quickly. So yes, we do that. There's a lot of information online about the R&D tax incentive. On the back of all of your pieces of paper, there's our little fact sheet. But yeah, please reach out to me, because that's what I do day in, day out.
Any other questions? No, okay, let's.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to answer that one. If I send out the information to our clients, they're going to come back and say, how do you get paid?
Yeah, so we have we work on a percentage basis, so we're 10% of the offset. So let's say our friend who spent $100,000, we're going to get 10% of that $43,500. Consultants generally work on that. They'll do that in varying degrees, but 10% is roughly the industry standard. There are fixed fee options out there too.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, so is the best person to speak to yourself or Tammy, or makes no difference?
It makes no difference,
Yeah,
but
no preference?
yeah, it's me, but
What's that?
call me. But
Okay.
yeah, Tammy can also help, and we've got a team, and we're pretty dedicated to what we do. So it's not just this grant; it's all grants, exporting, commercialising. There's a whole host of opportunities out there for Queensland businesses and Australian businesses as a whole.
Okay, fine.
Thanks,
So
everyone.